Welcome to another episode of Exercise Matters with me, Randall Cooper.
And me, Mick Hughes.
Support for today's episode comes from Premax Performance Skincare. If you're active, you focus on strength, endurance and recovery. But what about your skin? Sweat, friction and the elements take a toll. That's where Premax comes in. High-performance skincare made for high-performance people. From recovery creams to anti-chafe balms, massage creams to exercise-specific barrier creams, we help your skin go the distance. Keep your skin as fit as your body with Premax. Available now at premax.co.
And support for today's episode also comes from Learn.Physio. Health professionals, are you staying ahead of the game? Learn.Physio brings you cutting-edge education from world-class experts in sport to musculoskeletal medicine. Online courses, hands-on practicals and expert resources, all backed by the latest evidence and designed to fit into your busy schedule. To be your best, learn from the best. Get started today at Learn.Physio.
Well, welcome back, Mick. It's great to see
mate.
you again. Here we go again. I think that we're getting a lot more subscribers and followers on here, but I mean, that's great. And thank you to everyone who's joined us. But I also I've been personally, and I just don't say this for kind of publicity marketing reasons, but I've been really enjoying our chats. I like doing the background research. I think we always, you and I always learn something different, both in our own research and when the other person does it as well. So this is making us better as well as hopefully giving some great information back to you guys too.
100% yes, selfishly. Selfishly, we're getting better. Like that last chat we talked about, the strength gains that can be seen well and truly into our 30s was a really nice golden nugget of information that I'll take to the clinic, and I'll say that to every person that walks in the door for the next 12 months. So it's good.
Your 30-year-old patients will go out glowing after you've kind of told them that they can be as strong as ever in their life. Like they'll be bulletproof. So
they will. It's this series. It's fascinating, and I think it'll have wide-reaching benefits beyond just the performance aspect. I think longevity's a buzzword at the moment, and trying to live our best lives. Obviously, this whole running thing that people have just decided to take up. It's a very, very popular activity at the moment, which would be beneficial by getting some strength training and some plyometric into their bodies. It's just really this information is just going to beyond the scope of just what we talk to our physio patients about. It's definitely got some wide-reaching benefits. So it's nice to talk about it.
Then there's definitely some fashion in sport, and the thing I think that particularly with those topics that you mentioned before about the focus on, and also the science behind longevity, how exercise plays a part on how it manages chronic disease, it's so important. And I think that it's a great conversation, because a lot of other kind of exercise fads, whether you think it's been, Zumba or aerobics in the 80s or whatever it might be, they do come and go. Whereas these things that are grounded in evidence and scientific backing and can be applied to the way you want to exercise, I think is really important. And that's what I want to get across with this second part of this Strength for Life series. Last week we did part one. So if you're interested in talking about how strength training, resistance training can be incorporated into your life between the ages of 13 and about 35 or so, that's what we tackled last time. This one, we're kind of talking about the latter half of life. So we're talking about the adaptation phase between 35 and 50, what I've called the longevity focus between the ages of 50 and 65, and then independence and health span focus, 65 and plus. And clearly there's overlap between these, and these are just my invented kind of numbers, more so just to structure up this podcast. But yeah, we're going to talk about kind of getting a bit older and how you can kind of keep fit and healthy and do some strength training during this phase. So let's, are you ready to get into this, Mick?
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to this part, because I think, for me, this first part's obviously it sings straight to our age group, where I'm mid 40s, you're mid 40s as well. A little, I
bit
know
older,
you're
mate,
not,
bit older.
But it's just that important stage of life where, I feel and having discussions with my patients who are on the older side of life, just resistance training and strength training just is something that they don't often do. Obviously, where I'm saying it's a population bias for sure. People who are coming in injured or have got, complaints, musculoskeletal health complaints, they may already I'm just maybe saying a percentage of the population who are just not that interested. But I would, confidently say there's probably a whole bunch of people in their kind of 50s, 60s, 70s, even in their 40s, who just don't prioritize strength training or don't see the benefit of doing it just because of life demands. I think it's a really interesting stage of life where resistance training often just gets brushed aside, but I'm sure you'll have plenty of evidence to share that it should take more of a priority.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that if you think about like when our parents were kind of our age, the focus around that was like, oh, you got to go for a run or you got to go walking, back in the 80s and the 90s. Whereas now, I think the culture is shifting. I mean, maybe I'm getting a biased feed kind of
Yep.
on my social media and seeing, but everyone's talking about strength. I mean, the people that I talk to and, some of the podcast heroes like Huberman and Peter Attia, like they never stop talking about it. Stacey Sims, like it's definitely kind of increasing in awareness. And even
Yes.
to the point like my wife, who has never wanted to touch a weight
Yep.
in her life, is now getting to the point of going, I think I need a strength program
Yes. Yep.
because everyone's starting to talk about it. And it's great.
Yep.
But I think also I think the thing is, and we spoke about this, with the kids in the last episode, is that there's so much focus now on, so for my wife to say I need a strength program, I think that we can see how far things have shifted in recent years and obviously for the better. All right. So I want to talk about three phases in this podcast, what I've called the adaptation phase between the ages of 35 and 50. So this is really where you physically have been at your peak. For a lot of people, or that's what the world champs will be at. And it's about kind of adjusting to a new body for things starting to change. Clearly from a lifestyle point of view, most of us are very busy with whether it's family or career or combination of both those things. So I think this is a tricky phase for people to really keep fit in and maintain strength as best they can, because it will set them up, as we spoke about earlier, like those foundations and development years set you up for peak performance. Then I think this phase between basically age of 35 and about 60 or so really sets you up then for a really healthy, great older life. So we'll talk about some of the studies and the stats. I want to start off just with a few stats, and I don't want to scare people with these, but I think that we just need to acknowledge reality that we can't stay young forever, and the body does change. Muscle mass declines from the age of 30. So with the loss accelerating after the age of 60, estimates suggest that a loss of 3 to 8% of muscle mass per decade is what's usual. And that's predominantly type 2, which is the fast twitch muscle fibers. So the fast twitch and the quick muscle fibers tend to go before the slower ones. And also muscle strength declines faster than muscle mass by about 1 or 2% per year from the age of 30 or so, particularly if you're untrained, highlighting the need to access and do strength independently, and not focus on muscle mass. So I think there's a couple of points in there. The first is, yes, you do lose mass as you go on, but I know a lot of guys who are kind of in their 30s and the 40s who still look big and they still look quite muscular. But I see them training in the gym, or ask them to come around and give me a hand kind of lifting, the firewood or whatever, and just go, you don't really perform like the way you look. Do not judge a book by its cover. So I think and we'll talk about this as kind of this section goes on, is that, looks can be deceiving.
Absolutely.
The other the other one is also VO2 max and aerobic performance starts to decline from around about the age of 30 also, approximately 1% per year. So that's just the way the body is, like natural aging process. We will get a little bit weaker, and our aerobic forms will go down as we go. But as we were talking about before, I think that's overlaid often by just the stage in life with a modern Western life as well, where we're busy. And you and I talk about this all the time off air. It's like, we've got the kids doing this, like businesses are keeping us busy, and just finding that hour a day to train and to train well, and that not only get that hour, but have some energy for it. So you're feeling good as well. It's a tricky
Yeah,
phase.
it
Would you
is.
agree?
And it's also a phase where we start seeing people. I see quite a lot. It's interesting. You see your weekend warriors start coming into the clinic, your late 30s, early 40s, early 50s, men and women, who all of a sudden now are wondering, why I'm training twice a week. I'm playing a sport. Yes, I went away from sport and training for a while, but I'm now back. And they start wondering, why can't I sort of do what I used to do? What's so different now between when I could easily just rock up on a Saturday morning without training all week and get through and not get sore, not get injured? What's different now? And the way I kind of paint this story is that, what we do for fun, work, life, fun, play sport, go hike, have kids, all those kind of things. It's a relative constant stage of our life. So if we just sort of draw a graph, the things we do every day and every week, every month, every year, kind of relatively stays the same, give or take a little bit of an up and down. But our fitness and our strength is now, unfortunately, on this sort of downward trajectory. And that's where strength training can fill the gap between, this being constant and now decline. You see my nose through here. So that gap there is kind of, and that's where resistance training can fill that void to buffer kind of that lowering of strength, natural decline of strength and fitness. And that's the way I kind of sort of draw it on a graph and that kind of stuff. And people all of a sudden go, oh, I kind of get it now. And then all of a sudden now they're sort of bought into this whole process of, all right, if I want to do the fun stuff, you got to put the sort of work in, once or twice a week to get those kind of strength gains to help them do the fun stuff. So it's a kind of enlightening stage of life.
Yeah, I always we always use car analogies in our game, don't we? So my analogy always is that you're starting to move into being a classic car, and classic cars can work beautifully, but you've got to maintain them, right? And you've got to take more care at the maintenance. The maintenance now is a strength program. So yes, you want to go skiing, you want to go hiking, you want to do ice skating, great, okay, but do it on the background of strength training 3 or 4 times a week. And again, most people kind of go, that makes a lot of sense to me now. Yep. So I want to talk about the kind of the chat in the literature and also online now about this muscle mass versus muscle strength, and the way we term it now is muscle, the quality of muscle versus the quantity of muscle. And I think that, again, kind of following on from what I said about kind of sometimes you don't judge a don't judge a book by its cover, sorry, is really true. So what actually happens is that aging muscle often has more fat and connective tissue infiltration in it. That not only kind of makes the muscle look a little bit bigger, but it also decreases contractile performance, and particularly like your fast twitch fibers. So the type 2 fibers are the first to go, and the way to counteract that is with resistance training, but also, like, if you're thinking about those alpha neurons are the ones that are affected the most. Most people who get into a program between the ages of 35, or doing a program, I say, between the ages of 35 and, let's say, even 60 or so, like to do slow, controlled movements, like, yes, work hard, but you need to work those fast twitch fibers as well if you really want to kind of be kind of ahead of the game. So that includes to continue on with some explosive training. And even if you're ready for it, I think doing some plyometric training as well will help keep all those muscles firing, and particularly those fast twitch ones were the first to go. So go back to what you spoke about with the plyometric training. We spoke a lot clearly about people in their performative years, but I think it's also really good to integrate into this phase and the next one as well. So don't stop kind of doing some jumps and some explosive stuff just because you've kind of got over 40.
You think about, maybe these 40-year-old, 50-year-olds, they often have, some young kids around that, how often do you see like these young kids running off at them at the park, and all of a sudden mum and dad will have to just do this all out sprint to sort of stop them from going across the road. These the moments in time where you got to, run real fast all of a sudden. Like, you want to have that work in the legs. And, we see so many stories of people tearing their Achilles when they sort of do fun things, when they're, running and jumping at fast pace as they enter this stage of life. 100%, you've got to be prepared and have your body prepared for those kind of things that throw you away. But of course, to help you do the running, to help you do that kind of recreational activity that we all like to get into, tennis, all these kind of slower paced sports we often sort of start taking up in this stage of life, they do still require some kind of bounce and some plyometric work. So strength and plyometrics through these later stages of life are definitely important.
Yeah, and there was a nice study that I found that addressed this. It was published all the way back in 2010 by Agard and colleagues from their Scandinavian researchers. And the title of this one was called The Role of the Nervous System in Sarcopenia and Muscle Atrophy with Aging, Strength Training as a Countermeasure. So essentially what they were talking about was that it's not only got to do with the muscle fibers, it's got to do with also the nervous system as well, and that the nervous system is very important in firing up these muscles, and the nervous system needs to be stimulated as well as kind of like the muscle tissue as well. So what does that mean? That means that essentially, like we spoke about, in the last episode, that these kids need to do a lot of neuromuscular kind of training. And that is, that the stretch shortening cycle exercises, the plyometrics, the heavy lifting, the quick explosive movements, they're the ones that should still maintain integration, so you're not getting your nerves kind of deteriorating too quickly. Because once those neuromuscular junction kind of synapses have started to drop off, you can't get them back. So that's why I think it's really important for people to maintain some of that training throughout their 30s and their 40s to make sure they get to 50 in pretty good shape.
Absolutely.
Yep. The other thing that, I think interests you and me, Mick, is that, again, like, what you also see is that during this phase, for a lot of people, and again, we're Australian, we're typical, have kids at typical ages, when we're about in our 30s or so. A lot of people get into their early to mid 40s and their kids start to grow up a little bit. They're in high school, they get a little bit more time on their hands where they can start to train. And for me, this is where I started to get a lot of people back in the clinic, because I would call them comeback injuries. It's like I've just been so busy for the last 10 or 15 years. I've just been flat out with young kids and trying to get my career going. But now things are starting to kind of settle a little bit. I've decided I'm going to do an Ironman, or I'm decided that I'm going to get into the gym and lift super heavy. And they do it well for 6 weeks, but then they come in and say, I can't do it anymore because I'm sore and injured. So, the muscles, even at this age, will bounce back and strengthen up really quickly. But as we know, those harder tissues, the bone, the tendon injuries, the wear and tear, early stages of osteoarthritis, etc. These guys can just kind of rear their ugly head at this point. So I think it's very important that if you are getting back into a program after a prolonged period of time off, you do it gradually and you do it with some guidance from a qualified professional.
Wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah. And then that's overlaid also with weight gain for a lot of those people. We've talked about the middle-age spread. Both you and I have talked about it in other episodes where, we have to be very conscious of it ourselves as well. And a lot of people say, well, I just don't burn, energy the same way as I did when I was 20. That's crap. Because like the studies will say that your basal metabolic rate will go down a little bit, but it's in the vicinity of like 1 to 2% per decade. Like it's not significant, but most of it will come from you've lost muscle mass. And we know that muscle is a great metabolic engine. So the more muscle you have, like the better you'll burn energy. Reduced physical activity because you're just sitting on your bum, working in an office more and more. And you eat more compared to your 20s, even though you think you're not particularly high energy rich foods. So I think some of these lifestyles, and we're talking about resistance training in this podcast, but I also think that we have to acknowledge that these lifestyle factors are important for people as well. And they need to think about that as well as just the exercise they're doing. Yeah. All right. Just the other thing also is during this phase between the ages of 35 and 50, for our female listeners, is where most of our listeners will reach perimenopause. And I've always found it very difficult as a physio to kind of manage people during perimenopause, because you'll get a drop in estrogen levels, which will then create a drop in your collagen synthesis. So your tendons and your connective tissues are less elastic, prone to micro tears, slower to recover from load. You have reduced tendon stiffness. We spoke about this in an earlier episode where, that's not necessarily kind of a good thing. So then they're a little bit more prone to overload symptoms. So going back to what we spoke about, where a lot of people are getting into exercise again, if their time's starting to free up a little bit, if the females are then also going through perimenopause at that stage, it can be a really challenging and tricky period to get yourself going again, or to maintain yourself going during this phase. So again, I don't want to go into too much detail. I don't have too many tips or advice. I think we'll leave that to an expert, other than hang in there, keep your strength up, listen to your body, but try not to kind of stop at the same time as you can, because the weaker you get, it's probably not as good for you,
agreed.
obviously.
We will definitely get an expert. I would love to have Stacey Sims come along and have a chat with us one day. But in the meantime, if anyone is listening, Stacey's got plenty of tips and advice and resources there for perimenopausal and menopausal women and postmenopausal women about how to train through the right stages of life. And the other thing, just to add to that, is that anecdotally too, in discussions with some of my patients going through this, their sleep quality really is largely affected as well. So not only tendon and muscle biological issues going on, but just the body temperature and sleep quality starts to really decline, which then obviously compounds their ability to train, or their perceived levels of soreness and pain and their desire to train as well. So it's a huge beast. And it's something that certainly I don't understand, it's as well as what I should. And it'd be nice to have an expert come along and enlighten us with a little bit more detail here. But it's a tricky stage of life for females.
Well, reach out to Stacey, and also say that Randall's extremely keen to get you on as well. And hopefully with the two of us kind of begging that she'll come on and grace us with her presence for half an hour or so. I'd love to pick her brains on it.
I'm going to start pestering.
All right, sounds great. So we'll move on. So that's kind of like that adaptation phase between 35 and 50. And again, that's more so a lifestyle thing than it is a physiological, but yes, you are starting to kind of change. Now, this next section is what I call the longevity focus between the ages of 51 and 65. A lot of people start to realize at this point that life is finite. And then they'll talk about and acknowledge the difference between lifespan and health span. And that with the remaining kind of years that are ahead of me, and hopefully it's like 30, 40, 50 years in some cases, that I just want to live those well. And I don't want to live those with chronic disease and incapacity and not being able to do and the things that I'd like to do. So I think that this is definitely an area of emerging research. And there was a terrific paper published back in 2016 by Straight and colleagues in Sports Medicine, the title of which is Effects of Resistance Training on Lower Extremity Muscle Power in Middle-Aged and Older Adults. So it was a systematic review and a meta-analysis of only RCTs. So this was high-quality research. And the results are not surprising, Mick. Basically resistance training is effective in improving lower extremity muscle power in middle-aged adults. But the training mode is a crucial moderator. So even with this, what they found in the meta-analysis was that high velocity and power lifting and resistance training was superior to just doing slow, heavy, kind of normal, in inverted commas, kind of weights. So I think that, we spoke about that in that adaptation phase, that keep going with some of that quicker movement, some of the plyometric activity. I would have thought, actually, as you get a bit older and you do have issues such as osteoarthritis and whatever, maybe you should start backing that off and start going a little bit more gentle and slow. The evidence says don't. The evidence says keep it up and keep doing it. Use it or lose it is kind of the catch cry. Obviously,
that's a really fascinating and strong finding. It's I would probably hazard to guess most sort of 50, 60, 70-year-olds wouldn't engage in this type of training. They would certainly take a little bit more gentler and would be worried about their joints. And I'd even imagine most physios out there would probably not be that encouraging of that type of training in this age group, but it's clear there's a need for it. And I guess once again, the dosage is key, and that person sitting right in front of you, and their goals and their past history of injuries as well, and their musculoskeletal health and their job and their occupation, all those kind of things that kind of weighs into their programming each week needs to be taken into account. And it's obviously a clear message here that probably it needs to be done a little bit more frequently than it's being done.
Yeah, I agree. It did surprise me, and it is an important finding. So I think that when we're talking about resistance training for people between the age of 50 and 65 or so, yes, keep strong, but also
Yeah.
do some heavy, quick lifts and even integrate some plyometrics. And I think, like we had a few episodes ago about artificial intelligence and that kind of writing up your program. And I think this is a classic example of where human to human insight and help can really help. So get someone to kind of help you with the program at this point. If you want to do this kind of training and you haven't done it for 30 years, just don't go on YouTube and look up for how do I do box jumps. I think it's important that you get some guidance and some help to make sure you ease into this gradually and don't make yourself
And a
far
simple
too sore.
example here would be like just quickly. A simple example would be like on a leg press machine. It's just going in slowly, so we're doing that slow lengthening, but it's just quickly pushing and shortening the muscle like that. That could be just the simplest way you go about it. But of course, there's obviously plyometrics and box jumps and that kind of stuff. But it's getting that education from your health professional to say, okay, what part of the contraction do I need to go a bit harder and faster at? And it's that shortening phase where you just speed things up a bit.
Yeah, great. So we're going to gradually kind of move into kind of 65 plus, what I call the independence and the health span focus. But as a segue to that, I'd like just to quickly touch on a study that was done and published in 2023 by Adams and colleagues in sports medicine. And title of this one was Effects on Physical Activity Interventions on Strength, Balance and Falls in Middle-Aged Adults. And I thought this is a really interesting study because, both you and I would have looked after plenty of people who are in their older years who have suffered falls. And as we know, like when you fall as an older person, it's not good news. And particularly if you do something like fracture your hip and whatever. So it tends to be something that is only discussed post 65, whereas this paper has addressed it, should you be doing it earlier? And what they found, and this again was a systematic review and meta-analysis, what they found was that there was really strong evidence to show that both strength and balance can improve in this age group. So does the training work? Yeah, it does. You do balance exercises, your balance is going to get better. But there's no studies that looks at falls in people between those ages of roughly 50 and 65. So their thought was that, and I agree with this totally, and you don't want to kind of just do exercises to prepare yourself for later life. You want to enjoy it and whatever. I think the takeaway here was don't neglect balance training in a program until you get to the point their fall is really going to hurt you. And even for me, like I am starting to do balance exercises every time I train now, just as I do it as a warm up. So it's part of my warm up type of drill. So I maintain a lot of, for me is like I enjoy snow skiing. So I want to make sure that when I go snow skiing, I don't crash so much. But I think it's an important thing and an integration for people to not only think about getting going with some balance training when they're 70, but when they hit 50, just go, okay, I need to kind of integrate that into my care as well, because I think it's an important thing to maintain that so you stay healthy as part of that health span focus. Yep. All right. Then kind of moving into the 65 plus group. Now, I'm not going to go into heaps of detail. Really, I only just want to talk about one study because we're kind of running out of time and we don't have heaps of listeners who are here. But, for those people who have got parents in this age, then maybe it's really kind of interesting stuff. But I want to highlight just one study, and this looked at and assessed the long-term effects of up to 3 years of doing a 1-year supervised resistance training program with heavy loads. And this was a group of people who were between the ages of 64 and 75. And they looked at their leg extensor power. So basically they kind of took this older demographic, they put them in a resistance training program for a year, and then they reassessed them at 3 years post. And what they found was that 1 year of heavy resistance training can lead to long-lasting preservation of leg strength in older adults. So, we talk about use it or lose it. And, is it best to kind of just continue to do strengthening for the longer term? Of course it is. But if you even have a window where you're doing it and you do it well for a year and then you go traveling overseas, or even if you get sick or injured, for instance, you will get you'll get a long lasting effect from doing that program that will benefit you from years to come. So I think that's crucial, to think that, like you can do some strengthening and it's going to last you for a while in that older age group. It's important to do.
That's powerful. That's powerful information, because you'd see often, even and assuming in this study they stopped after 1 year, they weren't followed up until 3 years later. There's probably going to be some people in that study who would have just experienced the benefit and went, okay, I'm going to hang this on. They would and held on to this regular training. Not that necessarily was conflicting the results, but to form that habit and see that beautiful benefit, it is a really powerful message. It's nice to see this literature shine through, because I think a lot of people, when they get to this stage of life, they try to sort of find ways to maximise the quality of their years. Like you said, they get this sense of mortality, and they know there's only so many more years left, but they might want to go and travel the world and see parts of the world they've never seen before, and they want to do it in a comfortable way. And if they're giving themselves 6 months to get a bit stronger for this upcoming trip, then we've got the evidence to say they're going to have a much better time of it. Then that'll be a really big buy-in, part of the process of them committing to the plan and sticking to it.
Yep. So just a few quick points before we wrap up today. Strength training in this age group still remains very important. So keep doing it. Many people move from free weights to machine weights at this point, and I actually think that's a really good thing. Many people move from like traditional kind of gym style exercises into more functional movements like sit to stands and those type of things. So they practiced at that. I think that's not a bad thing either. It's very important to maintain balance and coordination to prevent those falls also. So does strength help prevent falls? Yes. Does balance and coordination exercises help prevent falls? Yes. So do both. But also, one thing I couldn't find, and particularly on the back of everything we've spoken about over the last 2 episodes about doing explosive power-based kind of strengthening training, my question to myself was, should we do it in this age group as well? Because my gut would say no. That this is probably where people are starting to get a bit too old for it. I couldn't find the research on it, so that one's just out for the debate. And I think also, like, if you get to this age and you haven't done that type of training before, be extremely conservative about getting into it. Whereas if you've kind of done it all your life and your body's used to it, then you can probably continue on. But again, get someone who knows what they're doing to kind of help you out there.
Yep, good messages.
Yep. So that's it. That's another episode done. Hopefully people got some value out of kind of like the journey of strength over the lifespan. I've enjoyed thinking about it and also putting these couple of episodes together. But Mick, thanks again for joining us on this episode.
Thanks for taking the deep dive. I've learned a ton as per usual, and I appreciate it. Yeah, mate, we better clock out. We've gone over 40. They'll have to edit this one.
It's usually you, not me. But anyway, I've got carried away today. That's a wrap for today's episode of Exercise Matters. If you enjoyed the chat, make sure to subscribe, leave a review and share it with your mates. A quick disclaimer, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not medical or individual advice. Always seek guidance from a qualified health professional for your specific needs. A big thanks to our sponsors, Premax High Performance Skincare for high performance people and Learn.Physio, world-class education for health professionals. Catch you next time.